You're useless, Mia. Can't even split a bill without crying. Gabriel Ashford's voice carried across the terrace of Villa Serenata, loud enough for 12 heads to turn. He slid the leather billfold toward me with 2 fingers, as if passing something contaminated. The number printed on cream paper made my stomach clench. 4,847 euros. Your turn to contribute, he continued, swirling his third glass of Barolo. Oh, wait. You can't. Laughter rippled through the table. Dylan Park, Gabriel's business partner, raised his phone to film. Serena Vance, the assistant who'd flown in from Boston yesterday, whispered something to the woman beside her. Both smirked. I'd known this dinner would be difficult. Gabriel's annual investor gathering always was. But I'd hoped Lake Como's beauty might soften him. That the romantic setting where we'd honeymooned 7 years ago might remind him of who we'd been before his firm consumed everything. Instead, he'd spent 3 hours performing for his audience, recounting deals, name-dropping clients, ordering wine that cost more per bottle than our first apartment's monthly rent. When the bill arrived, he'd seen his opportunity. I'm not doing this here, I said, quietly, reaching for my purse beneath the table. Doing what? Gabriel leaned back, enjoying himself. Participating in dinner you ate? These lovely people just spent an evening learning about wealth management. Time for a practical lesson in dependency. My face burned. Around us, the lakeside restaurant hummed with elegant conversation. Other tables glanced over, curious about the disturbance. Dylan zoomed in with his camera. Gabriel, man, you're savage. Just honest. My husband stood, tossing his napkin onto his chair. Mia likes to pretend she's a partner in our success. Compliance analyst for 3 years, then decided marriage was too exhausting to balance with work. He addressed the group now, playing to them. 10 years of supporting someone else's ambition. Must be comfortable. Serena giggled. She was 29, impeccably dressed, and had Gabriel's calendar memorized better than I did. When I'd questioned her inclusion on this trip, he'd called me paranoid. I pushed back from the table, chair scraping against stone. Excuse me? Where are you going? Gabriel caught my wrist as I passed. His grip was firm, public, designed to look casual. We're not finished. I am. I pulled free, walking toward the restaurant's interior before tears could betray me further. The bathroom's ornate mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. Designer dress Gabriel had picked out. Hair, styled the way he preferred. Makeup applied to his specifications for professional events. When had I stopped choosing anything for myself? My phone buzzed. Gabriel's name appeared. Dramatic exit. Very mature. I stared at the message, anger replacing humiliation. For months, I'd absorbed his casual cruelty, believing marriage required tolerance, that his stress from work justified his tone, that my sacrifice of career made me less entitled to respect. I typed, "You humiliated me in front of strangers." His response came immediately. "You humiliate yourself. I'm just honest about it." The bathroom's cool marble suddenly felt suffocating. I needed air, space, distance from the man who'd once promised to cherish me and now treated me like a failed investment. Outside, the terrace had emptied. Our group must have moved inside for after-dinner drinks. I bypassed the main entrance, following a stone path toward the hotel's private dock, where water lapped against ancient posts. The June evening held a chill that felt cleansing. Footsteps approached. Gabriel's cologne reached me before his voice. "Finished sulking? I want to go back to the room." I kept my eyes on the dark water. "We're going to the bar. Everyone's waiting." His hand found my shoulder, grip possessive. "Stop being difficult. Stop treating me like I'm beneath you. You make it easy." He moved in front of me, blocking my path. "Mia, look at yourself. You gave up a $30,000 a year job to Playhouse. Now you lecture me about respect?" "I gave up my career because you said it would help yours. You said we were building something together." "We are. I'm building. You're decorating." He pulled out his phone, scrolling. Here's what's not helpful: dragging me away from investors with your emotions. These people represent 8 million in potential business. Then go entertain them. I stepped around him. His hand shot out, snatching my phone from my jacket pocket. Not until you understand something. Gabriel, give it back. Do you know what your problem is? He held the device above my reach, his 6'2" frame using height as leverage. You think being married to me entitles you to the life I provide, but you're dead weight. You're drunk. I'm clear-headed. He turned toward the dock's edge, winding up like he was skipping stones. Want to know what happens to dead weight? The phone arced through the air, splashing into Lake Como's black water. For 3 seconds, I stared at the ripples, brain refusing to process what happened. There. Gabriel brushed his hands together. Now you can focus on what matters: my investors, my deals, my career that pays for your entire existence. Something inside me cracked. You threw my phone in the lake. You'll get a new one. I'll buy you a new one, just like I buy you everything else. He started back toward the hotel. Come inside when you're ready to behave. I stood paralyzed as his figure disappeared through the terrace entrance. Around me, insects hummed in the darkness. Across the water, lights from Bellagio's hillside villas glittered like distant stars. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 30. The cold seeped through my dress, matching the numbness spreading through my chest. My phone, with its contacts, banking apps, maps, photos, everything, rested somewhere beneath the surface in water too dark to see through. When I finally returned to the hotel's entrance, our rental car was gone. The valet confirmed Gabriel had left 20 minutes ago with Dylan and Serena. He said you'd be staying, the young man offered sympathetically. Did you need me to call you transportation? Where did he go? My voice sounded distant, belonging to someone else. He didn't say, Senora. Perhaps back to your hotel? Except our hotel was 40 minutes away, in Como proper, and I had no phone to call, no credit cards. Those were in my purse, which I left in the rental car's passenger seat when Gabriel insisted I bring only a small clutch to dinner. The clutch now held exactly 2 things: 40 euros and a lipstick. The valet was watching me with increasing concern. Behind him, Villa Serenata's lobby glowed with warm light, its elegance suddenly mocking. Tourists moved through its doors, carefree and connected. I was stranded in a foreign country, abandoned by my husband, with less than $50. Is there a phone I could use? I managed. He gestured toward the lobby. Of course, the front desk will help. The clerk was professional, patient with my American accent. But when I couldn't provide account numbers to verify my identity for credit card companies, she offered only sympathy. When I asked about inexpensive nearby lodging, her expression suggested nothing in Bellagio fit that description. Our rooms start at 300 euros per night, she said gently. There's a hostel in Como, but transportation would cost most of your cash. I stood at the marble desk, exhaustion crashing over me. Gabriel would come back. This was punishment, a power play designed to remind me of my dependence. He'd return tomorrow, or maybe the next day, expecting me to be grateful for rescue. Actually, a woman's voice spoke in accented English behind me. We may have a solution. I turned to find a woman in her mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing an elegant but practical linen suit. She'd been sitting in the lobby's reading area when I'd passed through earlier. I'm Francesca Cavallo. I own a boutique hotel here in Bellagio. She extended her hand. I couldn't help overhearing. You need lodging? Pride screamed to refuse. Reality whispered that I had no alternatives. I can pay 40 euros. That will be fine for tonight. She collected a business card from the desk clerk, writing something on its back. Tomorrow, we discuss the rest. The walk to her hotel took 15 minutes along cobblestone streets, lit by old-fashioned lamps. Francesca didn't press for details, only made observations about local architecture and history. Her building stood tucked into a hillside, smaller than Villa Serenata, but immaculately maintained. Flower boxes spilled over with geraniums beneath each window. The room is simple, she said, climbing stairs to the third floor, but private and clean. Simple was generous. The space held a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a window overlooking the lake. But it was warm, safe, and offered by someone who'd asked nothing in return. The bathroom is shared, end of the hall. Francesca set a towel on the bed. Breakfast is included, 7 to 9 a.m. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. I'll figure out payment tomorrow, once I reach my bank. She paused at the door. Your husband? He left you deliberately? I nodded, unable to speak, past the tightness in my throat. Then he's a fool. Francesca's expression was unreadable. Get some rest. Morning brings clarity. Alone, I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed. The ceiling's wood beams blurred as tears finally came. Not delicate crying, but wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. 7 years of marriage, 10 years together, total. I'd believed Gabriel when he said we were partners. I'd trusted him when he'd managed our finances, explaining it was simpler to have one person handle investments. I'd accepted his gentle discouragements when I'd mentioned consulting work. We don't need the money, and I need you focused on us. Now, I saw the architecture of my cage. Every decision that felt mutual had been his. Every sacrifice I'd made had benefited his trajectory. I'd become so small, so dependent, that he could discard me in a foreign country and know I'd have no recourse. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by phantom buzzing of a phone that no longer existed. Each time I woke, reality crashed down fresh, abandoned, trapped, powerless. Dawn broke with church bells ringing across the village. I rose mechanically, splashing water on my face from the hallway sink, attempting to smooth yesterday's dress. The mirror showed smudged makeup and tangled hair. I looked exactly how I felt, destroyed. Breakfast was laid out in a sunny dining room. Fresh bread, local cheeses, honey, espresso. 4 other guests sat at small tables, reading newspapers or quietly conversing. Normal people on normal vacations, untouched by personal disasters. Francesca appeared with a basket of pastries. You slept? Some. I accepted coffee gratefully. I need to figure out my next steps. Maybe the embassy can help with temporary documents? Perhaps. She refilled my cup. But first, eat. You'll need strength. The food was excellent, but I barely tasted it. My mind churned through options, each more complicated than the last. Getting emergency documents would take days, maybe weeks. Finding transportation to Milan's consulate would consume my remaining euros. Even if I reached the embassy, what then? Call my parents from a public phone, beg them to wire money, endure the questions about why my husband had abandoned me? I was thinking, Francesca said, returning to clear plates. You need work while you sort this situation. I need help with guest services. My English is good, but not perfect. Americans like speaking to Americans. I looked up sharply. You're offering me a job? Temporary position, room and meals included. Small wage. She smiled. Unless you prefer charity, which I suspect you don't. Pride and relief collided. I don't know how long it would take to... We handle what's in front of us first. She collected my empty cup. Come, I'll show you the office. The hotel's operations centered in a converted parlor behind the main desk. Files, reservation books, and a computer that looked ancient but functional filled the space. Francesca handed me a guest list for next week's arrivals. Americans traveling to Como for a wedding, she explained. They've emailed many questions about transportation, restaurants, activities. You could respond. It was simple work, but having purpose felt like being thrown a rope in deep water. I settled at the computer, grateful for distraction. That's when I saw it. Tucked beside the monitor, a phone charger cord. Different than what my drowned device would have needed. But it sparked a memory. My purse was in the rental car, and my purse contained my backup battery pack. And Gabriel always kept his laptop in a briefcase that he... The rental car, I interrupted Francesca's explanation of the booking system. When Gabriel left last night, did he take luggage? She considered. I was watching from the lobby window. The valet loaded only one bag into the back seat, but they stopped at the storage area first. The storage area. Villa Serenata had mentioned that larger items could be temporarily held for guests. Gabriel's presentation briefcase, the one he never brought to dinners because it was too bulky, the one containing his laptop and work files. My pulse accelerated. Do they still have it? Francesca understood instantly. Let me call them. The conversation was rapid Italian, too fast for me to follow, but Francesca's expression shifted from curious to knowing. She hung up, turning to me with raised eyebrows. They have his briefcase. The valet stored it because Signor Ashford said you'd collect it later. A pause. He assumed you were staying at Villa Serenata, so he left it deliberately. The realization settled cold and sharp. Gabriel had driven away, leaving me stranded, but also leaving behind his most important business tool. Either he'd been so drunk he'd forgotten it, or what? The thought remained unfinished as Francesca and I drove back to Villa Serenata in her small Fiat. The valet produced the briefcase quickly, checking my name against Gabriel's instructions. He was very clear you would come for this. In Francesca's office, I stared at the black leather case. Opening it felt like crossing a threshold. What if there was nothing useful inside? Worse, what if invading Gabriel's privacy made me as bad as him? He left you in a foreign country with no means of communication, Francesca said quietly. I think you've earned the right to see what he values more than his wife. The case wasn't locked. Inside, I found his laptop, charging cables, a folder of printed contracts, and a small stack of receipts rubber banded together. The laptop would be password protected, useless. But the receipts. I spread them across the desk. Jewelry purchases from Florence, 8,400 euros at Cartier. The date was 3 months ago, when Gabriel had supposedly been at a real estate conference. Did he give you jewelry? Francesca asked. No. My hands trembled, holding the receipt. The description listed a custom bracelet. Engraving. SV Always. Serena Vance. The pieces started connecting. Gabriel's insistence she join this trip. Her familiarity with his schedule. The way she'd smiled when he'd humiliated me at dinner. This wasn't new. This had been happening while I'd been home, playing the role of supportive wife. More receipts confirmed the pattern. Expensive dinners in cities where Gabriel claimed to be meeting clients. Hotel rooms at romantic resorts. Flowers sent to an address I didn't recognize. There's something else. Francesca was examining the briefcase's inner pocket. She pulled out a post-it note stuck to a business card. On it, written in Gabriel's distinctive angular handwriting, Serena G. 24. Is that? I started. A password, probably. Francesca pushed the laptop toward me. Open it. My finger hovered over the power button. This was definitively crossing a line. Reading receipts was one thing, accessing his computer files was another. I thought of Gabriel's voice last night. You're dead weight. I thought of my phone sinking into Lake Como. I thought of Serena's smirk. I turned on the laptop. The login screen appeared. I typed, Serena G. 24. The desktop loaded, folders arranged in neat rows. One immediately drew my attention. ITA Properties. Inside, email chains stretched back 18 months. Gabriel to Dylan. Rooted Brennan Family Trust through Genoa Shell. Wire clears Friday. 340,000 profit. Another email, this one from Serena. Paperwork complete. Cayman Holdings registered under GA Ltd. Bank confirmed receipt. I opened more files. Pulse racing. Client lists. Wire transfer confirmations. Shell company registrations. Every document painted the same picture. Gabriel wasn't just managing investments. He was diverting them. This is fraud, Francesca breathed, reading over my shoulder. Serious fraud. A folder labeled Cayman Transfers contained spreadsheets tracking money movement. Client deposits appeared in one column, wire transfers to offshore accounts in another. The totals made my head spin. over $2 million, moved incrementally over 2 years. Why would he keep all this on his laptop? I wondered aloud. Arrogance, Francesca replied. He believed no one would ever look. She was watching me intently now, her expression harder than before. Mia, I should tell you something about myself. Before I bought this hotel, I worked in Milan, forensic accounting for corporations investigating embezzlement. The revelation reframed everything. Her immediate offer of help, her careful questions, her recognition of the receipt's significance. She'd seen this pattern before. You knew, I said. When you overheard at Villa Serenata, you knew something was wrong. I suspected. Men who humiliate their wives publicly often have secrets worth protecting. She pulled a chair beside me. What do you want to do with this information? What did I want? Justice seemed too abstract, revenge too petty. What I wanted was to not be helpless, to not be the woman everyone pitied, to prove Gabriel wrong about my uselessness. I want to understand it first, I decided. All of it. Then I want to decide. We spent the next 6 hours dissecting Gabriel's files. Francesca's expertise transformed confusion into clarity. The shell companies were registered in Italy, but the money ultimately landed in Cayman accounts. Gabriel would tell clients he was investing in emerging real estate markets. Show them Italian property listings, then pocket portions of their deposits. It's sophisticated, Francesca admitted. The Italian registrations provide legal cover. If anyone questions the transfers, he can show legitimate business entities, but the ultimate beneficiaries are shell corporations he controls. How much has he stolen? By my count, $2.3 million, possibly more if there are accounts we haven't found. The number was incomprehensible. I'd worried about spending $20 on a dress. Gabriel had been moving millions. My anger solidified into something colder, more focused. If you're drawn to stories of women who find strength in unexpected places after betrayal, you might appreciate what happened next. Consider subscribing to follow journeys of resilience and rebirth. Now, let's witness how one abandoned woman turned evidence into power. That evening, Francesca made introductions at the local cafe, where tourists mixed with residents. Most conversations remained superficial, but one connection proved significant. Ayla Reeves, a British woman in her 30s who ran a co-working space near the waterfront, mentioned her background in cybersecurity. Corporate digital forensics, she explained over espresso, until I got tired of exposing rich men's secrets for other rich men. Moved here 2 years ago to build something more honest. Francesca caught my eye. Mia might benefit from your expertise. Within an hour, we'd returned to the hotel where Isla examined Gabriel's laptop with professional efficiency. She connected external drives, ran programs I didn't understand, and, occasionally, made disapproving noises. Your husband is clever, but not careful, she concluded. Everything's here. Email chains, wire confirmations, even a folder labeled Do Not Delete that contains client contracts with forged signatures. She looked at me directly. What's your plan? I'm still figuring that out. Well, while you figure, I'm backing up everything to encrypted storage. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. If he realizes his laptop is missing and tries to scrub records, you'll still have copies. Why are you helping me? The question emerged before I could stop it. You just met me? Isla's smile was sharp. I spent 5 years watching powerful men destroy evidence and walk away clean. I'm tired of watching powerful men win. Over the next 2 days, my education continued. Francesca introduced me to a lawyer friend in Milan who specialized in international fraud cases. Through secure video call, he reviewed screenshots Isla had prepared. This is serious, he confirmed. Wire fraud across borders, money laundering. If you report this to authorities, your husband faces significant prison time. But I heard the hesitation in his voice. But you obtained this evidence without permission. A good lawyer could argue it's inadmissible. You'd need corroborating witnesses or documentation obtained legally. What about the prenuptial agreement? I asked. Gabriel had insisted on one before our wedding, claiming it was standard practice for someone with his assets. I'd signed without reading carefully, trusting his explanation that it protected both of us. The lawyer requested a copy. I had none, but he suggested checking with the notary who'd processed it. 2 phone calls later, we had the document. Francesca read it aloud, translating legal language into plain speech. Standard divisions of assets, clauses about separate property, restrictions on alimony. Nothing surprising until the final page. Wait, Francesca said slowly. There's an addendum, Clause 7b. In the event of fraud, embezzlement, or criminal financial misconduct by either party, this agreement is void. The innocent party is entitled to 75% of all marital assets, plus litigation costs. Silence filled the small office. The lawyer on screen leaned forward. That's extremely unusual. Most prenups protect against exactly this scenario. Why would he include that clause? Maybe he believed he'd never get caught. Isla suggested. Arrogance, again. Or maybe, I thought, but didn't say. He'd included it before he'd started stealing, when he'd still been someone capable of making ethical choices. So, if we prove the fraud, I said slowly, I'm entitled to our assets. The Boston Brownstone, his investment accounts, everything. If you can prove it in court, the lawyer confirmed, which brings us back to the evidence problem. That's when Francesca suggested contacting her former colleague. Matteo works for the EU Financial Intelligence Unit now. If there's cross-border fraud involving Italian entities, it's their jurisdiction. She made the call that evening. I listened to rapid Italian, catching only occasional words. When she hung up, her expression was cautious. He'll review what we have, but he says the same thing as the lawyer. They need more than stolen laptop files. They need witnesses, documented transactions they can verify independently, or Gabriel confessing. He'll never confess, I said flatly. People confess when they're cornered, Isla offered, when they think confession is the better option. But how to corner someone like Gabriel, who'd built his entire career on manipulation and careful control? The question haunted me through dinner, through a sleepless night, into the next morning. The answer arrived with a phone call to Villa Serenata's front desk. Francesca took the message, then turned to me with raised eyebrows. Inspector Luca Moretti from the Guardia di Finanza is downstairs. He says he's investigating cross-border financial crimes and has questions about your husband. My heart hammered. They're already investigating? Apparently. And he wants to speak with you? Inspector Moretti was in his early 50s, gray threading through dark hair, wearing the sharp uniform of Italy's financial police. His English was accented but precise. Signora Ashford, thank you for meeting with me. We sat in Francesca's office. The door closed. Moretti placed a thin folder on the desk. I'll be direct. Your husband's business has appeared in connection with questionable real estate transactions in Genoa. We've been monitoring for 3 months. You've been watching him? The revelation shifted everything I'd assumed. Watching the business, yes, but we have no direct evidence linking Signor Ashford to criminal activity. His partner, Dylan Park, handles most operational details. Serena Vance processes paperwork. Your husband appears to be simply the face of the company. He opened the folder, showing surveillance photos. Gabriel entering buildings, meeting clients, always looking professional and legitimate. That's the point, I said. He's designed it that way, but he's the one moving the money. Moretti's expression remained neutral. You have evidence of this? I glanced at Francesca. She gave a small nod. We'd discussed this possibility, that going to authorities meant revealing how we'd obtained information. His laptop, I admitted. Email chains, wire transfers, everything. And you accessed this how? He left it behind when he abandoned me. I opened it using a password I found written down. Moretti's lips pressed thin. Signora, I understand your situation is difficult, but evidence obtained through unauthorized access creates problems for prosecution. His lawyers would argue it's inadmissible potentially claiming you planted information. So you can't use it. Defeat crept into my voice. I didn't say that. He leaned forward. I said it creates problems, not impossibilities. If your husband's laptop confirms what we've suspected, it gives us direction for our own investigation. We can subpoena bank records, question witnesses, build a legal case. How long would that take? Months, perhaps a year. He registered my disappointment. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but international financial crimes are complex. We cannot rush. Isla, who'd been quietly listening, spoke up. What if he confessed? Would that speed things up? Moretti smiled grimly. Men like Gabriel Ashford don't confess unless they believe it benefits them. He's facing serious charges. He'd fight. I thought about Gabriel's casual cruelty, his absolute certainty that I was useless without him. An idea began forming, dangerous and appealing in equal measure. What if we could make him think confession was the better option? I said slowly. What if he believed we had more evidence than we do? That's risky, Francesca warned. If he realizes you're bluffing, he won't. I was suddenly certain. Because he doesn't think I'm smart enough to bluff. He thinks I'm helpless, emotional, easily manipulated. Moretti studied me with new interest. What exactly are you proposing? Gabriel is hosting a keynote speech tomorrow at Villa Serenata. Something about ethical wealth management for emerging markets. I'd seen the conference agenda on his laptop. 200 investors will be there, financial journalists, live streamed to Bloomberg. You want to confront him publicly. Moretti's tone carried warning. That could go very wrong. Or very right. I met his gaze. You said you need evidence that would hold up legally. What if we could get him to admit everything in front of 200 witnesses? Silence stretched between us. Finally, Moretti pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my personal number. If you're serious about this plan, call me tonight. We'll discuss parameters. After he left, Francesca turned to me with concern etched across her features. Mia, what you're suggesting is extremely dangerous. If Gabriel realizes what you're doing, he won't, I interrupted, because he's already told himself the story of who I am. A helpless wife he can discard, and people like Gabriel never question their own narratives. That evening, the phone rang. The hotel's receptionist found me in the small courtyard where I'd been rehearsing what I'd say tomorrow. Signora, a call for you. The gentleman says he's your husband. I took the handset, heart racing. Gabriel. Mia. His voice carried relief and irritation in equal measure. Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. Days. As if he hadn't thrown my phone in a lake, as if abandoning me had been a small misunderstanding. I've been here. You knew where I was. Look, I'm calling to apologize. I was drunk. I overreacted. But this has gone on long enough. Don't you think? The familiar condescension threaded his words. I'm at a conference at Villa Serenata tomorrow. After my keynote, we'll talk properly. I'll buy you a new phone, we'll go home, and put this behind us. You want me to wait for you. I kept my voice even, like nothing happened. I want us to be adults about a mistake. Impatience crept in. My presentation is at 2 p.m. Meet me afterward. What's the presentation about? I asked. Ethical wealth management in emerging markets. Why? Just curious. I paused, letting him think I was being difficult. Fine, I'll be there. Good. Relief flooded his voice. Wear something nice. There will be important people. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone, then at Francesca, who'd been listening nearby. He actually called you, she breathed. After everything. He thinks I'm conquered. I set down the phone. He thinks I'll come back grateful. Will you? She asked gently. Yes. I met her eyes, but not the way he expects. That night, I called Inspector Moretti. We spoke for 2 hours, refining the plan, anticipating problems. He agreed to attend the conference, bringing 2 colleagues. But understand, he warned, if this fails, We may not get another opportunity. Gabriel will lawyer up, destroy evidence, disappear into legal protection. It won't fail, I said, with more confidence than I felt. The next morning arrived too quickly. Isla came by the hotel at 9 a.m., her laptop bag over her shoulder. I've been working all night. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. She showed me what she'd prepared, a clean presentation of Gabriel's evidence, organized chronologically. Wire transfers traced from client accounts through shell companies to Cayman accounts. Email chains showing deliberate fraud. Forged signatures highlighted. Every piece of evidence numbered and sourced. It's not admissible in court, she reminded me, but it tells a story, and sometimes stories are more powerful than law. Francesca helped me dress. Not in the designer clothes Gabriel preferred, but in a simple black dress borrowed from her closet. Professional. Serious. Not the decorative wife he expected. By 1:30 p.m., we stood outside Villa Serenata's conference hall. Through windows, I could see the setup. A stage with podium, large projection screen, rows of chairs filled with elegantly dressed attendees. Gabriel stood near the front, shaking hands, radiating the charm that had first attracted me a decade ago. Serena was beside him, whispering something that made him laugh. Dylan worked the crowd on the other side, distributing business cards. They looked confident, successful, untouchable. Inspector Moretti appeared at my elbow. Last chance to reconsider? I thought about the woman I'd been 4 days ago. The one who'd accepted humiliation as the price of marriage. Who'd believed her worth was measured by her husband's opinion. Who'd been so thoroughly controlled that she couldn't imagine another life. That woman was gone, drowned in Lake Como along with my phone. I'm ready, I said. Then let's see if your husband is as arrogant as you believe. Moretti opened the door. Because if he's not, this could destroy you instead. The hall's warmth hit me immediately, along with the hum of 200 conversations. I slipped into a back row seat as Gabriel took the stage to applause. The projection screen behind him displayed his company logo. Elegant, professional, trustworthy. Good afternoon, Gabriel began, his voice smooth and practiced. Today, I want to discuss something rarely addressed in our industry. The ethical responsibilities that come with managing other people's wealth. Beside me, Isla opened her laptop. Ready when you are, she whispered. I watched my husband perform, knowing that in approximately 45 minutes, everything he'd built would collapse. The question was whether I'd be strong enough to be the one who pushed. Gabriel's presentation flowed with practiced ease. He spoke about fiduciary duty, about the sacred trust between advisor and client, about transparency as the foundation of wealth management. Every word was polished, every gesture calculated. The audience nodded along, some taking notes. In emerging markets, he continued, advancing his slide deck, opportunities abound, but so do temptations to cut corners, to prioritize profit over principle. He paused for effect. That's why my firm has built its reputation on one simple commitment, putting client interests first, always. Beside me, Isla made a disgusted sound. He's actually giving a speech about ethics while running a fraud scheme. That's the point, I whispered back. The best cover for corruption is appearing incorruptible. Inspector Moretti had positioned himself near the side exit, 2 plainclothes colleagues scattered throughout the audience. He caught my eye, nodding slightly. Everything was in place. Now, we needed the opportunity. Gabriel fielded questions from the audience, each answer demonstrating his expertise. He referenced Italian property law, discussed SEC regulations, quoted statistics about real estate appreciation in developing markets. To anyone listening, he sounded exactly like what he claimed to be. A knowledgeable professional committed to ethical practice. Then Serena approached the stage, whispering something to Gabriel. His expression flickered, just for a moment, before smoothing back to professional calm. She returned to her seat in the front row, but something about her posture had changed. Tense, alert. What just happened? Isla asked. I don't know. But instinct told me something had shifted. The presentation wound toward its conclusion. Gabriel thanked everyone for attending, mentioned his firm's contact information would be available at the registration desk, and invited people to approach him individually with questions. Applause filled the hall. People rose, heading toward the reception area where wine and canapes waited. This was my moment before the crowd dispersed, while everyone was still together. I stood, but Francesca's hand caught my arm. Wait, look. Serena had slipped out a side door. Dylan followed seconds later, his phone pressed to his ear, expression worried. Something was wrong with their plan, whatever it had been. Moretti moved quickly, intercepting Dylan before he could leave. I watched them exchange words, Dylan's face draining of color. Then Moretti gestured toward a conference room off the main hall. Dylan looked toward where Gabriel stood, surrounded by admirers, then back at Moretti. He nodded once and followed the inspector. They're questioning him, Francesca breathed. Your inspector friend is making a move. 20 minutes passed. I remained in my back row seat while the crowd mingled, watching Gabriel work the room. He was in his element, confident and charismatic. Several times I caught him glancing toward the exits, clearly looking for Dylan or Serena. Neither appeared. Finally, Moretti emerged from the conference room. He walked directly to Gabriel, showed credentials, and spoke quietly. Gabriel's smile faltered. He excused himself from the group of investors, following Moretti to the same conference room. The door closed. What do we do? Isla asked. We wait. My heart hammered against my ribs. Everything depended on what happened in that room. 30 minutes. The reception crowd began thinning as people returned to their rooms or departed for dinner reservations. Francesca bought us espresso from the hotel bar, the bitter liquid doing nothing to calm my nerves. When Moretti emerged again, his expression was unreadable. He found me immediately, tilting his head toward the courtyard. I followed, Francesca and Isla close behind. Dylan Park has agreed to cooperate, Moretti said, without preamble. In exchange for immunity, he's providing testimony about the fraud operation. He claims Gabriel Ashford orchestrated everything, that he and Serena simply followed instructions. Relief and disappointment warred in my chest. That's good, isn't it? You have a witness. We have a witness claiming duress. His lawyer will argue Gabriel manipulated him. Moretti's jaw tightened. It helps, but it's not definitive. And Serena Vance has disappeared. She left the conference an hour ago. Destination unknown. What about Gabriel? Is he still here? With his attorney, Marco Rinaldi flew in from Rome this morning. Moretti's expression darkened. Rinaldi is claiming the evidence from the laptop is inadmissible, obtained through theft and invasion of privacy. He's threatening to file charges against you for corporate espionage. The world tilted. I didn't steal anything. Gabriel left it. Rinaldi argues you accessed it without permission, using a password obtained through snooping. Technically, under Italian law, that could constitute unauthorized access to computer systems. He held up a hand, stopping my protest. I don't believe you'll be charged. But it creates reasonable doubt about the evidence's validity. So we're back where we started. Defeat crept through my voice. Not quite. Moretti pulled out his phone, showing me a photo. Dylan provided this, a recording of a conversation between himself and Gabriel from 3 weeks ago. Gabriel explicitly instructing him to route client funds through the Genoa shell company. I listened to the audio through Moretti's earbuds. Gabriel's voice was unmistakable. The Brennan Trust wire needs to clear by Friday. Route it through Genoa Holdings like we discussed. Same process as the others. This is confession, I said. It's evidence of intent, Moretti corrected. But Rinaldi will argue it's out of context that Gabriel was discussing legitimate business operations. We need more. Isla, who'd been studying her laptop screen, looked up suddenly. I found something. Serena Vance's cloud storage. She didn't just disappear. She deleted her accounts. But deletion isn't instantaneous. I caught her backup before it purged. She turned the screen toward us. Files filled the display. Contracts, bank statements, emails. She's been documenting everything. every transaction, every instruction from Gabriel, like she was building insurance. Or evidence for when she inevitably got caught, Francesca suggested. Moretti examined the files, his expression shifting from skeptical to intent. This changes things. If Serena Vance documented Gabriel's instructions independently, it corroborates Dylan's testimony. But she's gone, I pointed out. How do we use this without her? We have the documents. If they're authentic, and I believe they are, we can build a case even without her physical testimony. Moretti straightened. I need to brief my colleagues. Stay here. He left us in the courtyard. The sun was setting over Lake Como, painting the water gold and pink, beautiful and serene, completely at odds with the chaos churning inside me. We're close, Francesca said gently. Closer than we were this morning, but not close enough. I watched boats drift across the water. Gabriel's lawyer will tie this up for months. He'll claim everything is a misunderstanding, that we're vindictive and unstable. By the time it gets to court, if it gets to court, he'll have restructured everything, hidden the evidence, prepared his defense. Then we don't wait for court. Isla was typing rapidly. We take this public, now. Before he can spin the narrative. How? She gestured toward the conference hall. There are 6 financial journalists still in that building. Bloomberg is still live streaming the reception. If we give them the story, with evidence, it becomes news before it becomes legal proceedings. That could compromise the investigation, Francesca warned, or it could force Gabriel's hand. I was suddenly certain. If this becomes public, if his reputation is destroyed before he can manage it, he'll have nothing left to protect. People like Gabriel only care about image. Take that away, and maybe he'll stop fighting. Moretti returned before we could debate further. Gabriel Ashford is leaving. Rinaldi convinced him to return to Como, to their hotel, while we continue investigating. They think they have time to prepare a defense. Let them go, I said. Everyone turned to stare at me. Let them leave, I repeated. But first, we need Gabriel to know we're serious, that we're not going away quietly. Moretti studied me. What are you proposing? I'm proposing I talk to my husband. One conversation, in front of witnesses. I met his gaze. You said people like Gabriel don't confess unless they think it benefits them. What if we make him think confession is his only option? 20 minutes later, I stood outside the conference room where Gabriel and his attorney waited. Moretti had arranged it, one final meeting before Gabriel departed, ostensibly to discuss reconciliation and dropping the laptop access charges. I smoothed my borrowed dress, steadied my breathing, and opened the door. Gabriel sat at a polished table, Marco Rinaldi beside him. Both men stood as I entered, professional courtesy masking calculation. Moretti and one colleague positioned themselves near the walls, present but not intrusive. Mia. Gabriel's voice carried warmth that didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad you agreed to talk. This has all gotten out of hand. Has it? I remained standing, keeping the table between us. Sit, please. He gestured to a chair. When I didn't move, his smile tightened. Look, I know I made a mistake in Como. Leaving you was wrong. I was drunk, angry, and I acted poorly. But what you've done since, accessing my private files, making accusations, that's crossed a line. I found evidence of fraud. You found confidential business documents you had no right to view. Rinaldi spoke now, his tone clipped and professional. Documents obtained illegally. Any accusations based on them are baseless and actionable. So the wire transfers aren't real? The shell companies don't exist? Gabriel leaned back, confidence returning. The wire transfers are real. The companies are real. They're legitimate business entities operating within Italian and international law. The fact that you don't understand corporate finance doesn't make them criminal. Dylan Park says otherwise. Something flickered in Gabriel's expression. Dylan is panicking. He's being manipulated by investigators who don't understand our industry. Once his actual lawyer arrives, not the public defender he's stuck with, He'll recant everything. And Serena? She disappeared. Serena is handling personal business. She'll be back. But Gabriel's jaw tightened as he said it. He didn't know where she was, and that worried him. I pulled out my phone, placing it on the table. Isla had transferred key files to my device, insurance in case Gabriel destroyed his laptop. You routed $2.3 million through Cayman shell companies over 18 months, client funds that should have been invested in Italian real estate. Instead, they went into accounts you control. Rinaldi reached for the phone. This device contains stolen property. We could confiscate it right now. Moretti intervened. Actually, those files have been backed up to secure servers. Confiscating her phone accomplishes nothing. Gabriel's eyes narrowed, focusing on me with new intensity. What do you want, Mia? Money? A better divorce settlement? Name your price. The casual assumption that I could be bought sent fury through my veins. I want you to face consequences. For once in your life, I want you to answer for what you've done. I've done nothing wrong. His voice hardened. I've built a successful business using legal structures that you're too unsophisticated to comprehend. If you'd spent less time playing housewife and more time educating yourself, you'd understand that. Is that what you tell yourself? I leaned forward. That everyone criticizing you is just too stupid to understand your brilliance? I tell myself the truth. Gabriel stood, buttoning his jacket. And the truth is, you're embarrassing yourself. These investigators, these accusations, they'll go nowhere. My lawyers will ensure that. And when this is over, you'll have destroyed whatever goodwill remained between us. There is no goodwill between us, Gabriel. There hasn't been for years. You've been stealing from clients while I played the role of devoted wife. I paused, letting the words land. But here's what you haven't considered. I don't care about goodwill. I care about justice. And I'm willing to burn our entire life down to get it. Silence stretched between us. Rinaldi glanced at Gabriel, waiting for instruction. Finally, Gabriel smiled, cold and sharp. You won't burn anything, Mia, because you don't have the courage. You never did. That's why you stayed home, why you gave up your career, why you've spent a decade being exactly what I needed you to be. Malleable and easy to ignore. The insult that would have devastated me a week ago now felt hollow. You're right. That woman didn't have courage, but she doesn't exist anymore. You killed her when you threw my phone in the lake and drove away. What's standing in front of you now is someone who has nothing left to lose. I walked toward the door, then paused. The conference you spoke at today, Villa Serenata, requires all keynote speakers to sign an ethics agreement. Standard practice for financial presentations. It includes a clause about accurate representation of credentials and clean financial history. Gabriel's face went carefully blank. So? So you signed a document swearing your record was clean. Under Italian law, that's a binding representation. If it's false, it constitutes fraud separate from the client theft. Inspector Moretti can prosecute based on that alone. Rinaldi scrambled to check his briefcase, searching for the conference paperwork. Gabriel remained frozen, calculating. I saw the moment he understood I'd trapped him with his own arrogance. You planned this, he said slowly. The confrontation. Getting me to come to Villa Serenata specifically. You came here because you always planned to. For the conference you booked 3 months ago. I met his stare. I just made sure I'd be here when you did. Moretti stepped forward. Signor Ashford, we're going to need you to remain in Italy pending further investigation. Your passport, please. This is absurd. But Gabriel's voice had lost its certainty. Marco, tell them they can't do this. Rinaldi was reading the conference agreement, his expression darkening. Gabriel, did you review this document before signing? I glanced at it. Standard boilerplate. It's not standard. This clause specifically requires disclosure of any ongoing investigations or questionable financial activities. You signed it yesterday? We received the first inquiry about your business from the EU Financial Intelligence Unit 4 days ago. The color drained from Gabriel's face. That's a technicality, a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding you could have disclosed. Moretti's tone was implacable. Instead, you certified your record was clean while under active investigation. That's actionable misrepresentation. Gabriel turned on me, fury replacing calculation. You set me up. You knew about the investigation timeline. You planned for me to sign that agreement. I didn't plan anything, I said honestly. But when I found out you were speaking here, I made sure I understood the venue's requirements. You did the rest yourself. Rinaldi was gathering his papers, already preparing damage control. We're leaving, now. If you want to question my client further, it will be through official channels with proper documentation. Actually, a new voice spoke from the doorway. A woman entered, mid-40s, carrying the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Signor Ashford isn't leaving. I'm Deputy Director Castellano from the EU Financial Intelligence Unit. We have additional questions. Gabriel's professional mask finally cracked. About what? About your company's registration in Genoa. Specifically, why you chose that location. She pulled out a file, spreading documents across the table. We've been monitoring cross-border wire transfers for 6 months. Your company's pattern is interesting. You always route large transactions through Genoa Holdings during specific quarterly windows. Why? Strategic tax planning, Rinaldi answered quickly. Perfectly legal. Except Genoa Holdings wasn't registered until after your clients made their deposits. You collected their money, then created the entity you claimed to be investing in. Castellano's smile was sharp. That's not tax planning. That's fraud construction. Gabriel's hands gripped the table edge. You're twisting things. The timing was for legitimate reasons. What reasons? Castellano pressed. And that's when Gabriel made his fatal mistake. Stress, anger, and the need to prove his intelligence all converged. He straightened, looking at Castellano with condescension. Because Como provides unique jurisdiction advantages for wire transfers, the Genoa Shell Company had to be registered here to take advantage of the Q3 wire window. If I'd held the conference anywhere else, the timing wouldn't work. I needed the Italian jurisdiction loophole. Silence fell like a blade. Moretti's eyes widened slightly. Castellano's expression shifted from pressing to satisfied. Even Rinaldi went rigid. I stared at Gabriel, my mind racing. You just said the Shell Company is registered in Como, but in your emails, you told Dylan it was registered in Genoa. Gabriel realized his error, but too late. I misspoke. The stress, no. The pieces were assembling rapidly now. You said you needed Como specifically, that the conference had to be here. Why would the conference location matter for a business registration? His face had gone pale. Unless, I continued, voice strengthening, you didn't just book the conference here. You staged everything here. The abandonment, leaving the laptop, all of it. That's absurd. But his voice wavered. You said you had to use Como for the wire window timing. But why abandon me in Como? Why not Milan, Florence, Rome? I moved closer, reading his expression. Because you needed someone to find the laptop. Someone who'd go to Italian authorities in the exact jurisdiction where your shell company was registered. Someone who'd trigger an investigation you could control. Gabriel's attorney grabbed his arm. Don't say anything else. But I saw the truth written across Gabriel's features. The careful planning, the deliberate cruelty disguised as drunken impulse. The notary, I breathed. The lawyer who set up the Como Shell Company. You paid them off. You created a system where if anyone investigated, they'd hit a wall of legal protection. But you needed someone to start the investigation at the right time. In the right place. This is speculation, Rinaldi insisted. Then why did you abandon me the night before your keynote? I demanded, looking at Gabriel. Why leave the laptop so obviously accessible? Why make sure I'd be stranded here, angry enough to look for evidence? Gabriel's composure finally shattered. You don't understand. The timing. The wire transfers had to clear by Friday. If authorities started investigating after the money moved, I could claim ignorance. But if they investigated before, while it was in transit, I'd have plausible deniability. I needed someone to trigger the investigation at precisely the right moment. So you used me. The words emerged flat, beyond anger. I used strategy. His voice rose, defensive. The Como registration created a legal buffer. My associate here, he gestured vaguely, the notary who filed the papers, he's protected under Italian corporate veil law. If you'd reported the fraud a week ago, exactly as I planned, the investigation would have hit his wall. By the time they got through it, the money would be clean. Except I didn't report it when you planned, I said. I waited. I gathered more evidence. I brought it to your keynote speech. You ruined everything. Gabriel's hands were shaking. The wire window closes tomorrow. The money's stuck in transit. If they freeze the accounts now, he stopped, realizing he'd confessed to everything. Moretti and Castellano exchanged glances. Signor Ashford, Castellano said quietly, you've just admitted to premeditating fraud, to manipulating an investigation, and to using your wife as an unwitting accomplice. Everything you've said has been recorded. Gabriel looked at the small device on the table. Moretti's official recorder, its red light steady. His face went ashen. Rinaldi stood abruptly. This interview is over. My client is invoking his right to silence. But the damage was done. Gabriel had confessed everything, on record, in front of multiple witnesses. There would be no talking his way out now. As Moretti read Gabriel his rights in careful Italian and English, I found myself unable to feel triumph. Instead, there was only exhaustion and a strange emptiness where rage had been. They led him out in handcuffs. Moretti insisted on that formality. Gabriel didn't look at me as he passed, his professional mask finally abandoned in favor of raw defeat. Francesca found me in the courtyard minutes later, pressing a glass of wine into my hand. You did it. We did it, I sipped mechanically. All of us. But you're the one who saw the pattern, who realized he'd planned your abandonment. She studied my face. How do you feel? Empty. I stared at the wine. I thought I'd feel victorious, or at least relieved, but I just feel tired. That's normal. Isla appeared, her laptop under one arm. You've been running on adrenaline for days. Now that it's over, the crash comes. It's not over, I corrected. There's still the trial, the asset division, rebuilding my life. But the hardest part is done, Francesca said gently. You've proven he was wrong about you. That's worth more than money. Maybe. But sitting in that courtyard, watching the sun finish setting over Lake Como, I couldn't shake the feeling that Gabriel had one more surprise waiting. The answer came 1 week later. I was in Francesca's office, reviewing paperwork from my lawyer. The prenuptial agreements clause had held. I was entitled to 75% of all marital assets, plus litigation costs. Gabriel's Boston brownstone, investment accounts, and liquid assets totaled just over $4 million. After legal fees, I'd walk away with approximately $3 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to rebuild completely, to fund any dream I'd deferred. Yet it felt hollow, compensation, for a decade of diminishing myself. Isla knocked, then entered without waiting. You need to see this. She set her laptop on the desk, pulling up a news article. Remember Serena Vance? The assistant who disappeared. I'd wondered about her in idle moments, where she'd gone, whether Gabriel had arranged her escape, if she'd eventually testify. I found something while digging through old case files. Isla pulled up a photograph. This is Angela Morrison, disbarred attorney from Florida, 2019, real estate fraud. She helped developers create shell companies to hide assets from investors. The photo showed a woman in her late 20s, professional attire, dark hair styled differently than I remembered. But The face was familiar. The scar above her left eyebrow. That's Serena, I breathed. Exactly. Isla pulled up another image. Serena's professional headshot from Gabriel's company website. Same person, different name. My mind raced through implications. She wasn't his assistant. She was his partner. The one who knew how to create the legal structures for his fraud. More than that, Isla showed me email headers from Gabriel's laptop, the ones I'd skimmed past before. Look at who set up the Cayman entities. A. Morrison, legal counsel, Cayman registry. Angela. Morrison. Not Marco Rinaldi, the Italian lawyer arrested with Gabriel. The real architect of the fraud had been Serena all along. She's been running cons with disbarred lawyers' credentials for 5 years, Isla continued. Different names, different faces, minor plastic surgery, hair changes, but always the same MO. Find a wealthy professional, pose as their assistant or junior partner, set up sophisticated fraud schemes, then disappear before authorities close in. Gabriel thought he was using her, I said slowly, but she was using him. Francesca appeared in the doorway, holding her phone. Inspector Moretti just called. The EU Financial Intelligence Unit found another offshore entity, registered 3 months ago. Female signatory. They're requesting you come to Milan for an interview. The pieces clicked into place with nauseating clarity. She set him up. Serena. Angela. Whoever she really is. She created a second fraud scheme using Gabriel's name. When he goes to prison, she'll have access to accounts he doesn't even know exist. Unless we can prove it. Isla was already typing. But she's good. Really good. I found 6 other identities, 3 other partners who went to prison while she walked away clean. I stared at the photographs of Angela Morrison/Serena Vance. In them, I saw my own reflection. A woman who'd underestimated her opponent, who'd thought the battle was over when it had only just begun. We need to find her, I said. Francesca squeezed my shoulder. First, you need to rest. You've been fighting for a week straight. Let the authorities handle this next phase. She was right. But as I looked at Serena's face on the screen, I knew this wasn't over. Gabriel had used me as a pawn in his scheme. Serena had used Gabriel. And somewhere, she was planning her next move. If you've ever been underestimated and had to prove your strength, comment below. I want to know if you've faced someone who thought they could control you, only to discover they were wrong. Your stories matter. That night, I stood on the balcony of my small room, looking out over Lake Como. My phone, a new one Francesca had helped me purchase, buzzed with a notification. The email came from an encrypted address. No subject line, just a single sentence. He really did think you were useless. Mistake number 1. I stared at the words, then at the sender field. Anonymous remailer? Untraceable. But I knew who'd sent it. Serena was watching, waiting to see if I'd pursue her or let her disappear into her next identity. Below me, a boat moved across the dark water, its lights reflecting like stars. Tomorrow, Inspector Moretti and I would travel to Milan. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. But tonight, I allowed myself one moment of truth. Gabriel had abandoned me, intending to break me, to prove my dependence. Instead, he'd given me exactly what I needed, a reason to discover I'd never been useless at all. The realization settled over me like the cool night air. For 10 years, I'd measured my worth through Gabriel's eyes. When he'd praised my appearance at dinner parties, I'd felt valuable. When he'd dismissed my opinions about investments, I'd questioned my intelligence. When he'd slowly excluded me from financial decisions, I'd accepted it as his way of protecting me from stress. Every diminishment had been wrapped in the language of care, making it impossible to see the cage being built around me. Standing on this balcony in a borrowed dress, with a new phone purchased with money Francesca had loaned me, I owned nothing Gabriel had provided. Not the designer clothes hanging in our Boston closet. Not the luxury car titled in his name. Not even the credit cards I'd carried, which had always been connected to accounts he monitored. For the first time since our wedding, I existed independent of his infrastructure. And I was still here, still standing, still capable of thought and action and strategy. The woman Gabriel had abandoned would have crumbled. She would have called her parents in tears, begging for rescue. She would have blamed herself for provoking his anger, convinced herself she deserved humiliation for not being grateful enough. That woman had believed her survival depended on Gabriel's continued approval. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I'd spent a week gathering evidence, building alliances, outthinking a man who'd spent a decade underestimating me. I'd stood in a conference room and watched my husband confess to crimes he'd thought himself too clever to be caught committing. I'd done all of that with 40 euros, a borrowed laptop, and the help of women who'd seen potential Gabriel had never recognized. I just hadn't realized that in breaking free from Gabriel, I'd walked straight into someone else's carefully constructed trap. Serena had planned for everything: Gabriel's arrest, the evidence trail, even my role in exposing him. She'd orchestrated the entire performance, and we'd all played our parts perfectly. The sophistication of her scheme was almost admirable. She'd positioned herself as Gabriel's loyal assistant, while systematically documenting his crimes. She created secondary fraud structures he didn't know existed, ensuring that even if he went down, she'd profit. She'd probably encourage his worst impulses, knowing they'd eventually trigger the kind of public downfall that would distract from her own escape. And she'd counted on me. Not specifically. I doubted she'd known Gabriel would abandon anyone in Como. But she'd understood that someone would eventually find the evidence. Someone would be angry enough, desperate enough, or righteous enough to take it to authorities. She'd built a fraud scheme designed to collapse in a way that looked like justice while actually serving her purposes. The scary part was how close she'd come to succeeding completely. If Isla hadn't found the photo of Angela Morrison, if I hadn't noticed the inconsistency in Gabriel's confession about Como versus Genoa, Serena Swa would have vanished with millions, while we'd congratulated ourselves on catching the criminal. Now I had to decide if I'd keep playing or if I'd finally write my own script. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Same anonymous sender. "See you soon, Mia. We have so much to discuss." My thumb hovered over the delete button. Serena was testing me, seeing if I'd respond. She wanted to know if I was the kind of person who'd chase her, who'd make finding her a personal mission. That's what people like her thrived on: the game, the pursuit, the thrill of staying one step ahead of someone desperate to catch them. I deleted both messages, but the words remained burned in my memory. Serena wanted me to chase her. That was part of her game, too. The thrill of being pursued, of staying one step ahead. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction, because here was the truth Serena hadn't counted on. I didn't need to catch her to win. Gabriel's arrest meant my prenuptial clause held. Inspector Moretti had enough evidence to pursue Serena independently. My involvement was optional, not essential. The EU Financial Intelligence Unit had resources and authority I lacked. They could freeze accounts, issue warrants, coordinate with international agencies. My participation would add one more voice to their investigation, nothing more. Serena wanted me emotionally invested because emotional investment made people predictable. It made them take risks, make mistakes, prioritize revenge over safety. She'd probably done this before with other victims, sent cryptic messages, issued subtle challenges, then exploited their need for closure to manipulate them further. But I'd just spent a week learning that my greatest power came from patience and strategy, not impulsive action, from building alliances rather than fighting alone, from understanding systems and using them rather than trying to tear them down through force of will. Instead, I do what I should have done from the start: build my own life, independent of Gabriel's shadow and Serena's manipulations. Let the authorities hunt her. Let them unravel her schemes. Tomorrow morning, I'd meet with Inspector Moretti as planned. I'd share what Isla had discovered about Angela Morrison's pattern of fraud partnerships. I'd provide my statement about Serena's behavior and any details I remembered that might help their investigation. Then I'd step back and let professionals handle the work they were trained for. After that, I had practical matters to address. My lawyer in Boston had already begun proceedings to access marital assets. The brownstone would need to be listed, furniture sorted, our shared life dismantled into separate futures. I'd need to find temporary housing. Francesca had offered her spare room for as long as necessary, but I couldn't impose indefinitely. More importantly, I needed to reconstruct myself professionally. 10 years away from compliance analysis meant my skills were outdated, my network dissolved. But Francesca had mentioned knowing people in Milan's financial sector. Isla had connections in corporate cybersecurity. Between them, I might find consulting opportunities that could rebuild my career on my own terms. The design work I'd abandoned felt like a lifetime ago, but sitting in Francesca's office, updating her spreadsheets, had reminded me how much I'd enjoyed problem solving, creating systems that worked efficiently, seeing patterns others missed. Maybe I didn't need to return to exactly what I'd done before. Maybe I could build something new, combining financial analysis with design thinking, helping businesses structure themselves more effectively. I had $3 million, a new life waiting, and finally, the freedom to choose my own path. 3 million felt surreal. I'd grown up middle class, worked for modest salaries, watched Gabriel's wealth accumulate while having no real understanding of the numbers involved. Now I'd have resources to fund education, start a business, invest in my own future rather than simply supporting someone else's ambitions. But more valuable than the money was the knowledge that I'd earned it through my own capabilities. Not through passive inheritance or lucky marriage, but through investigation, strategy, and the courage to act when acting felt impossible. That knowledge couldn't be taken away, couldn't depreciate, couldn't be stolen by a con artist with a new identity. Whatever came next would be on my terms. The lake glittered beneath the stars, peaceful and eternal. Somewhere out there, Serena was planning. Gabriel was stewing in an Italian cell, and I was standing on a balcony, no longer the woman who'd been abandoned. I was the woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who'd proven that useless was the one thing I'd never been. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Moretti would want detailed statements. My lawyer would need decisions about asset division. The Milan interview would require mental preparation. And somewhere in all of that, I'd need to grieve. Not for Gabriel, but for the decade I'd spent diminishing myself to fit his requirements. But tonight, for the first time in a decade, I belonged entirely to myself. My choices, my future, my definition of success and happiness and worth. No one else's measuring stick determining whether I was enough. Just me, figuring out who I wanted to become now that I was finally free to choose. And that was victory enough.